And welcome. We've got a few people still connecting. Good to see everybody today. A few people still connecting. Hope everybody is doing okay. And if you've been able to get a vaccine, I hope you have. If you haven't, I hope you will soon. I felt A-okay after my first dose last week and was very grateful to do so. I said I never cried in a grocery store before, but last Thursday I did. So welcome. We're still connecting a few people. It's wonderful to see everyone. As we have been doing, and we kind of missed last week, I guess I was in kind of a hurry. I was a little distracted, but we've been taking some time at the beginning of our class to introduce ourselves to each other. A few people have yet to go. Joan Popkin is joining us, rather new to the class. So how are you? Good. Joan, if you'd like to say hello to your fellow classmates and maybe say where you're from, how you got introduced to JTS, we could all welcome you, learn a little bit more about you. We've got people on the class from all over. We have, I think, New York, New Jersey, let me see, Delray, Jacksonville, Sarasota. Where, okay, we don't have Houston, Texas on this morning. I know he was going to miss today. But Joan, I'll let you say hi.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We just moved here a few weeks ago from our home of 26 years in New Jersey. And I know Rabbi Berkowitz from our Teaneck Shul and enjoyed your teaching there a couple of times and enjoyed visiting you in your art studio in Jerusalem.
Remember, Joan, it's great to have you back in the space.
Yes. Hi, Joan. It's Barbara Lewin.
Hi, Barbara.
Now, where did you say that you're living now?
Now we live in Boca.
Oh, lovely.
Sorry,
okay, great.
Everybody ends up in Boca or thereabouts.
And connection with JTS, well, let me see. I mean, many years in the shul that we used to attend. Many of the faculty davened at the shul. We sent our children to a program at JTS when they were preteens. We've been longtime contributors to JTS. It goes on and on.
Terrific.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Good to have you. Good to have you. Is there anyone else who'd like to say hi who hasn't yet done so?
Yes, I would.
Okay, good. Please, Naomi.
Yes, well, obviously my name is Naomi, and I would like to thank you for welcoming me to this lovely family of learners here. It has been a very stimulating experience for me. My connection with JTS stems from my childhood. We lived in Brooklyn, in contrast to all of you New Jersey people. It's just across the bridge. You don't need a passport or anything. You can get there.
Right.
And I lived on Eastern Parkway, just across the street from the Lubavitcher headquarters, and up the street from the Brooklyn Jewish Center, where we went to Hebrew school and participated for years. The rabbi there was Israel Leventhal, who is from Philadelphia, a long family of rabbis there. And he really believed in conservative Judaism and in the synagogue as the center for Jewish life, so that this Brooklyn Jewish Center had a gym, a swimming pool, and of course sponsored United Synagogue Youth, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, this seminary was always mentioned and was a topic of conversation. And then I really wasn't connected specifically to the seminary, although I went to Hebrew high school. And then when I was at Barnard, my first year as a freshman, I thought I would travel up the 4 blocks up and go to the seminary at night, but traveling as a 16-year-old home 10 o'clock at night on the subway to Brooklyn was not such a great idea. So I was sort of peripheral. My children went to Hebrew school, and I think that we maintained our Jewishness because they married Jewish girls, which is, I think, a success. So I went on and on. I had a big career, but now I'm retired. And somehow or other, I think I found myself a couple of years ago with money that I really didn't need. So I decided to give it to the seminary. And at that time, I was introduced by a very lovely lady in New York who called and thanked me, for the gift to the seminary. And we started talking, and I told her about my interest in learning, and we started discussing community learning. And so that was my introduction. I have to say that Jewish women are absolutely wonderful representatives of the seminary. They're intelligent, warm, and just so helpful. And so here I am, and I am keeping alive during this pandemic by participating in community learning. I think this is one of the most wonderful experiences of my retirement life, which has been a very difficult one. So thank you all.
Naomi, let me just say how excited I am. This is like a coming out party for you because we can actually see your face. And in previous classes, you've been like this bat kol, you've been this heavenly voice speaking to us. And this is the first time that I'm able to see you in all of your fullness.
Well,
so
thank you. Thank you. Hello. And it's always nice to see you. And I did get a copy of your Haggadah, and it was a very interesting experience and very user-friendly. Oh, you have it with you. How do you like that? Okay.
And not only do I have it with me, but sitting in this Beit Midrash is the patron of this Haggadah, Steve Lovell. It was Steve and Dee Dee that gave birth to this very, very precious gift. So I always think of them this time of year. It is. So enjoy it.
And Steve is actually just up the street in Palm Beach Gardens, Naomi, from where you are. So it's really a small world. All right, next week we'll take some time to meet some others. I'm going to welcome. Good afternoon, Rabbi Berkowitz, and we'll start our learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi and Joan, for sharing your beautiful story of connection with JTS, and to all of you that have been doing this over the weeks. It's great to have you back. For those of you who attended Adi Ness, the amazing Israeli photographer, I hope you enjoyed the program. He's truly, like I said that afternoon, he is a ness. He is truly a miracle and gift to the Jewish world. So hope you enjoyed that. If you didn't get a chance to log in to that, you can get the recording. Carolyn's got her hands on the link. I have my hands on the link. So email either of us. We're happy to send it to you. It's definitely worth taking an hour out of your time to watch.
Hey, Matt, I don't know that you're an artist. What is your art form? I heard her say you have a studio.
So yes, so my art is, I am partners in an art studio with Elisa Moss-Rabinowitz and David Moss in Chutzot HaYotzer. And we run a studio project called Kol Ha'ot, Illuminating Jewish Life Through Art. And so I worked on a Haggadah over 7 years' time.
I have that. I have that.
There you go.
Of David.
And so this, I'll just give you a little sense. This is one of the paper cuts from that Haggadah.
Oh.
Right?
Wow.
The idea behind the paper cut is this goes together with that. And yes, we'll have to do another session.
Thank you.
Just to whet your appetite. So that's my artwork.
We could do a separate Passover edition. I just want to add, Matt actually created that Haggadah while he was working full-time for JTS in Florida. So he would be out teaching, running Palm Beach Gardens, Jacksonville, Orlando, wherever he was. And then he would get home at 6 o'clock at night. And that's when he would start his art. It was really unbelievable to watch the whole process happen. So we'll talk more.
It was a labor of love. Thank you for asking about it. Shelley.
So I'm the least artistic person in the world, but after being friends with you while you created that, I took a paper cutting course, and I am going now to try to learn to do Hebrew calligraphy. So I plan to contact you. Nothing I've created is anything like you've created, but I've actually created a ketubah. So, and I'm hoping to learn the calligraphy, and I would love to speak with you in the future about that.
Wonderful. We will make a date. We will definitely make it happen. So what I wanted to mention before I forget is that our next Israel Experiential program is going to be March 24th, Wednesday, March 24th, not to be missed, because my very dear colleague and mentor, David Moss, is going to be teaching on his Haggadah. So I encourage you to log in for that, to get some Pesach.
At what time in the day? At what time?
It's going to be at 1 p.m.
Okay.
1 p.m. Yeah,
right.
It's middle of the day.
Okay, thanks,
so
honey.
We'll send out a notice about that.
We would love to have you. And I think we're ready to jump in to our Parsha learning. Okay, so this week we have the Parashot of Vayakhel-Pekudei. And here we are talking about art and artists. And these two parashot are occupied with the details of the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle. And the artistry of the Mishkan is put into the hands of two very, very famous biblical artists of the tradition, Bezalel and Oholiav, right? I am sure you have all heard of Bezalel. In fact, right, the first very, very famous school founded in the land of Israel, art school founded in the land of Israel, is the Bezalel Academy, which was founded by Boris Schatz. Right, Boris had the privilege of sitting down with Theodor Herzl and pitching his idea of having this art school, and he came to this very special place in pre-state years and established that art school in the heart of Jerusalem. So I am sure many of you know Bezalel from that art school, or right directly from Torah, from this week's parasha. And his assistant is Oholiav. So they are commissioned to work on the art of the tabernacle. And as I said, we're immersed in the details of this building project. And I feel that in so many ways, these parashot are tailored perfectly to the point of the Jewish calendar where we are right now. Because of course, just before Pesach, we are all so detail oriented in what we are doing, right? In cleaning our homes, in getting ready for Seder, right? I would say even a little too detail oriented. So it's even more appropriate that today I'm going to be talking to you about sinks. Not koshering sinks, but we're going to be talking about the sink that was in the midst of the holy space that's described in the Parsha. I've entitled this Of Sinks, Sex, and Sanctity. Okay, and you'll see through the course of the hour how all of this is linked together in a very, very interesting way. And so much of what we're going to be talking about highlights the connection between the holy and the profane. I hate to use the word profane. I'm not so keen on it. However, holy and secular, holy and routine, maybe, you know, all of those could work well in contrast to, right, to holy. Okay, secular, routine, profane, right? Think of all of those, and we're going to see how it is that we move from these sinks that are described in the tabernacle, right, to a place of bringing routine and that which is, you know, considered to be at least at first glance, right, unholy, how we bring it into a holy context. So let's take a look at our source sheet. Some of you have printed it out and others will take a look on the share screen. I am pulling the text up for us right now. In a moment, I will change the view so you can see it better. Okay, here we are. Okay, the inspiration for today. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, make a laver, a sink of copper and a stand of copper for it for washing, and place it between the tent of meeting and the altar. Put water in it and let Aaron and his sons wash their hands and feet in water drawn from it. When they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water that they may not die, or when they approach the altar to serve, to turn into smoke an offering by fire to the Lord. And then the text goes on in Exodus chapter 38, verse 8, where we're told the following, right? Very, very intriguing. He made the laver of copper and its stand of copper from the mirrors of the women who performed tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Okay, again, as we do every week, we're taking recourse to the translation of the JPS Torah Commentary, Jewish Publication Society. I always say every translation is a commentary, right? JPS is loyal to the pshat, the literal sense of the text. And I want to share with you two comments that are made on this description of that sink, which tells us that it's made from the mirrors of the women who perform tasks. What does that mean? So first of all, a little about the mirrors from Nahum Sarna, who wrote the Exodus commentary. Also, I should say Nahum Sarna of blessed memory. The later years of his life, he lived in Boca Raton, Florida, Ir HaKodesh, the holy city. In ancient times, mirrors were mainly of the kind held in the hand. They were highly polished discs of molten metal, copper, or bronze, and were fitted with handles made of metal, wood, or ivory. Egypt was the manufacturing center of this article for the entire Near East. Okay, very, very interesting piece of realia about these mirrors. And then look at what Nahum Sarna goes on to say about these women who gave their mirrors. He writes, it is likely that these women performed menial work. None of the evidence supports the notion that they exercised any ritual or cultic function. The idea here is that even these women at the bottom of the occupational and social scale displayed unselfish generosity and sacrificial devotion in donating their valuable bronze mirrors. Okay, so what do we have here? What Torah is describing and what Nahum Sarna adds in giving us the literal sense of the text here is that it reinforces the notion of all of those whose hearts move them, right? That's what Torah tells us about those who contributed to the building of the tabernacle, that it's everyone whose heart moves them, right? They contribute, and they contribute with a spirit of unbounded generosity. So much so, right? We should all be blessed with this in our capital campaigns for our various institutions, and especially at JTS, right? In chapter 36 of the book of Exodus, right, it tells us how Moses' assistants come to him and they say the following: the people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that the Lord has commanded to be done. Moses thereupon had this proclamation made throughout the camp: let no man or woman make further effort toward gifts for the sanctuary. So the people stopped bringing their gifts, okay, since more than enough had been given at that point, right? It's amazing, right? The generosity was so that Moses had to make a proclamation in the camp to tell people to stop giving. Could you imagine if all of our campaigns got to that point, how wonderful and beautiful it would be, right? But what Sarna is telling us here is that even the poorest of the poor did not withhold that which was precious to them. Okay, so there you've got the literal, let's say, academic take on what Torah is describing to us. And now I want to show you the midrashic take, what the rabbis share with us about the same passage. Okay, again, this is sparked by these women, these anonymous women that Torah talks of in giving their mirrors. So Rashi, the prolific medieval commentator on our verse, Exodus 38:8, says the following. Okay, and what you need to know is that this is not Rashi's own language, but he quotes a classical midrash in explaining this verse. He says the following. His comment is on of the mirrors of the women crowding. The Israelite women possessed mirrors of copper into which they used to look when they adorned themselves. Even these did they not hesitate to bring as a contribution towards the tabernacle. Now Moses was about to reject them since they were made to pander to their vanity. But the Holy One, blessed be God, said to Moses, accept them. These are dearer to me than all the other contributions, because through them the women reared those huge hosts in Egypt. For when their husbands were tired through the crushing labor, they used to bring them food and drink and induce them to eat. Then they would take the mirrors, and each gazed at herself in her mirror together with her husband, saying endearingly to him, see, I am handsomer than you. Thus they awakened their husband's affection and subsequently became the mothers of many children. And it was for this reason that the laver, the sink, was made of these mirrors, because it served the purpose of promoting peace between man and wife. Okay, let's discuss. There was a lot there. Let's unpack that midrash and let's do the Rashi on Rashi.
Okay, so Naomi had her hand up with a question, and Shelley also put a question in the chat. What is the exact definition of kol? Is it profane?
The exact definition of chol, okay, as in, right, yes. The exact definition, I can't say that there is an exact definition, and that's what's so problematic. Chol refers to that which is not holy, right? And it's interesting because even with the word holy, with kadosh, I wouldn't say that there is an exact Hebrew, exact English equivalent to it. Okay, because what is kadosh? What does it mean to be kadosh? Kadosh literally means to be separated, to be apart, right? Or sanctified, as Nadia just put in the chat, right? That is what kadosh is. Kadosh is to be taken away from that which is regular, right? And made special. Okay, that's what kadosh is.
Okay. Naomi?
I was under this I had the understanding that chol was meant every day, like in chol hamoed, the everyday days in the and the difference between kodesh and chol is that chol is every day. But my question went back to just like the initial sentence of today's lecture. I'm sort of confused about, is the Mishkan divided into various rooms? Like one is the room of whatever they said, of meeting, and then another room, and then finally the Mishkan. Is that
exactly, Naomi? And that's yes.
Oh, and so when they're giving these directions, though it's for the building of the Mishkan, it seems like that they're only directing it towards the altar itself, the Mishkan, and the only reference to the thing of meeting is where they're going to put this laver. So when do they use the other meetings? What up to now, did they ever have any meeting place, any kind of a tent where they all got together? I mean, what's going on? I just don't understand what's going on here. Is this the first synagogue that's being built?
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, right? And it's in the sense of a synagogue as a Beit Knesset, right? A house of assembly. That's exactly what's going on here in terms of, right? The tent of meeting is precisely that, right? It's that space in which we congregate together, okay?
And that was was that in front of the Mishkan and where
Exactly.
the high priest would go?
Yes, right. That's the way to think about it. I'm flipping through the pages of my JPS because they lay out very, very nicely. They give a map of these sacred spaces. What I will do is I will scan this map for you and send it to you. Okay, so you can visualize it even better.
Diane Carmen, then Shelley Gross.
Yeah, actually the midrash that I heard about the mirrors was not just about the women making themselves beautiful because the husbands were tired, et cetera, et cetera. It was when the edict went out that the Hebrew babies should be killed. And that's when the women were making themselves absolutely gorgeous and seducing their husbands to make sure that they would carry on. Now, maybe that's, you know, hearsay, I don't know. I mean,
No, it's not hearsay. It's directly from the original midrash, Diane. So I'm very, very happy that you mentioned that, because what Rashi seems to do, Rashi highlights the notion of shalom bayit. He highlights the notion of peace between, right, husband and wife here. But it's not simply about shalom bayit. As you're pointing out, it's about the perpetuation of the people. That, and I would say that, and what your point, that's the most important point of all of this, right? Because, you know, what was the sacred act that they were engaged with? That even in the face of genocide, right, they were determined to perpetuate the Jewish people, right? We hear stories like this coming out of the Shoah as well.
Shelley, Diane, then Toby.
Okay, I have nothing to say. Write that down because Diane said what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Diane, then Toby.
All right. I found this to be very interesting. Not only were the women concerned that their husbands should be fed and strong after a long day, but it wasn't enough just for the husband to look at his wife, but by putting the mirror up and the two of them together, it allowed the husband to say, yes, we are a couple. We're more than you just we make a family. We come together as a union. I mean, we're so important to one another. And I like when they use that, you know, when she says, I am more handsome than you, I'm better looking than you. It doesn't matter whether he's better looking or she's better looking, but together they talk about how important they are to one another. And their love is really the most important thing that they share, even more than the food itself. So at least that's
I love how you describe that, Diane. I love how you describe that. And that's something, it seems to me, that Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moses needed to hear as well, because Moses, according to this midrash, has this very knee-jerk reaction, right? Mm-hmm. He has this visceral reaction when he hears that these mirrors are going to be included in this sacred place. And he doesn't want that. And God says, lahefech, right? Of even more so, right? Because of what they were used for, because of their purpose, which was both, Diane, as you're pointing out, right? The two Dianes here got, you know, both sides of what they were used for, right? One for the perpetuation of the people, and the other, right, to bring the couple closer together. And it wasn't so much the beauty competition, like you're pointing out, but it was.
And the other thing I wanted to say was, when you originally spoke about, you know, giving the mirrors and putting it into this particular place, when you think of a mirror is something that reflects. So to me, it was as though it was a reflection of the kindness of these women that the mirrors, you know, were put in there, you know, to constantly remind us that we always need to look into ourselves, not be judgmental, but to actually take a moment and understand the goodness and the sacrifices that we make as a people for our future.
Very nice. Very, very nice.
Toby?
Lovely.
Yeah, two things. One, if these were the the poorer women who donated their mirrors, most likely they only had one mirror, whereas the people who gave jewelry, it was likely that they had more than one bracelet, more than one pair of earrings or whatever. So they gave some, but probably not all, whereas a mirror would be a singular possession that they were giving up. And the other thing is where it says Shalom Bayit, this basin, and I don't remember exactly how, was used in the Sota ritual, which the rabbis also say was for the sake of Shalom Bayit. So it's fitting that there's that link as well.
Very nice. Very, very good. Okay, I want to take us back into the sources, and we'll open it up again in just a moment. Okay, I want to move from a French commentator to a Spanish commentator, Spanish exegete Ibn Ezra, who gives us an alternative point of view here. Okay, from the way that Rashi frames it. I'm going to scroll down. Okay, Ibn Ezra says the following to us. And the reason that the Torah says Hatzovot, these crowds of women, is because women habitually look in the mirror, made of copper or glass, every morning to put their headdress into shape. Now, amongst the Israelites were certain women dedicated to the service of God who distanced themselves from worldly desire. They donated their mirrors to the Mishkan as they had no further use for beautification. These women would come each day to the entrance of the tent of meeting to pray and to hear the details of the mitzvot. And these crowds near the entrance of the tent are hatzovot, referred to in the Torah. So how is it that Ibn Ezra understands this business of mirrors coming from women? And how does it contrast to Rashi's explanation?
Shelley?
It feels like he's diminishing what they did. You know, Rashi's saying that they've given up something really special, and he's saying that they're like people who are purists, like almost like a priest or a nun would do. You know,
Exactly.
he's making it into something less special.
Good, excellent. On the one hand, he's elevating the status of these particular women, right, by saying that, you know, they were on a higher spiritual level. Okay, that's, you know, on the other hand, right, I think you're absolutely right. He's diminishing the value of these mirrors now, saying, what's the big deal? You know, they didn't need them anyway. So, you know, what kind of sacrifice was this for them?
Susan, then Toby. And we just need you to unmute, Susan.
I'm wondering if these women were Nazarites, that they were making a vow and a commitment that was strong and deep.
I wonder if the women were, or I wonder if the rabbis who wrote this midrash were. I think there's a stronger possibility of, you know, of the latter rather than the former here, right? That most likely this was an ascetic sect of rabbis, right? This is what Ibn Ezra was, you know, putting on the pedestal as the ideal for us, you know, when in fact it was probably more like Rashi here.
Toby, and then Naomi, then I think Larry had a comment from before.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is not what is usually extolled in the Torah or by the rabbis, this kind of asceticism. So, you know, your explanation makes more sense that, you know, that this isn't what Torah usually is about.
Right. It's excellent. It's not, but you definitely see this stream running through rabbinic thought. And we're going to see that in the next couple of sources that we take a look at too. But clearly both of them, both Rashi and Ibn Ezra are struggling with the pull of beauty here, right? And what beauty represents and how beauty, right, could either inspire us or, right, lead us off the path.
Naomi, then Larry.
Oh, sorry.
Then Diane, sorry. Just trying to go in order here.
All right, no, it's okay.
I don't think that Ibn Ezra was trying to put down the women. I think that he was saying that they had given up the worldly desires, and that just the mirrors were a symbol of what they were giving up because they were devoting themselves to the holy. So I think that they're struggling, and I don't think either one of them is particularly convincing at this point.
Right. My only response to you, Naomi, would be to say that, part of what Ibn Ezra is expressing here is that beauty is something that needs to be overcome. Beauty is something that needs to be transcended, right? That seems to be what he's, promoting as the ideal here, as opposed to Rashi, who's saying that beauty plays a very, very important and sacred role in our lives.
Yes, I think that Rashi was saying that the beauty is what is attracting to the husband, and they procreated. So he is not putting down beauty, which fits in with the way that the Lord is instructing them to make a beautiful Mishkan. So, beauty does play a part in Judaism, but we haven't really explored it yet.
Larry?
Yeah, I'm trailing a little bit, but to go back to Naomi's comment about the setup of the Mishkan, when we were in Egypt and you go through a lot of these Egyptian temples, it was interesting to see that they're set up in a set of rooms that sort of go progressively into the Holy of Holies, and a lot of the temples had pools of water for cleansing. So it seems like this Mishkan or temple is very much based on what the Egyptians were doing at the time. Just as an observation.
Yes, and I just want to add to what you're saying, Larry, that this is something that is very, very Jewish. It's very Israelite and very Jewish. If you haven't read David Beale's book, The Cultures of the Jews, it's a must read because he shows how in every generation, what we have done so brilliantly as a people is we have borrowed from other cultures in which we lived, right? So as you're pointing out, there's no question that Egyptian environment influenced the way we pictured our own holy spaces. Naomi, I did find the map that is in JPS. I'm going to try and hold it up so you can see it, but I will scan this for you. Right, I know you're seeing it in mirror image, right? But there it gives you a sense of the different spaces. You even see where the laver is, right? Where that's meant to be.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll scan that. We'll send that out to everyone. Diane, then Barbara, then Joel.
Okay. Excuse me. Could I just add that looking at your diagram, it looks very much like what we see when, of the way that they represent how the temple was in Jerusalem was laid out with an outer courtyard, and then you eventually got inside.
Right, exactly. First we had the movable Beit HaMikdash, right, otherwise known as the Mishkan, and then eventually when the Israelites are settled, they build the entire floor plan of the temples exactly as it is that it's.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
This is a different question, not going with what everyone else is reading about, because the minute Shelley brought up the word nun, that's exactly what I was thinking about, the nuns. I'm just curious, with Christianity and Jesus, whatever his name was when he was born, I mean, these are things he studied, as a child and whatever, and I'm just curious. So people always go back to a source. So this particular piece right over here, did Christianity look at this as something future for women who wanted to be more committed to God? Because it more or less says what this particular commentary speaks about, Matt. about women who were more interested in being almost like giving their lives to God, past family or whatever. I'm just curious.
Right. It's a very, very interesting
another-
question. I mean, the big overarching question is here is to what extent does Christian exegesis and philosophy influence our own exegetes, right? How does that influence, Jewish, and I'm sure that some of what the rabbis wrote in their own commentary was, a response to, to Christian commentary. It could potentially overlap here, it might not. But I do believe there's some resonance. I'm glad you pointed that out. It seems to me there is some point of contact there.
Okay, thank you.
Now that we're on
Time
this,
for Barbara and Joel. Sorry, they had their hands up.
Who's next?
Go ahead,
I'm
Joel.
next.
And that really,
I guess I don't know. Was I in the queue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I look at the passages from Rashi and the passages from Ibn Ezra in a different way. I look at the one from Rashi stating that these women did make themselves beautiful, and their goal was to continue the Jewish lineage, to create Jewish children. And yes, they did have to make themselves appealing to their tired, exhausted husbands, but I think it also has to do with, it foreshadows the fact that the Jewish lineage goes to the mother because they always know who gave birth to the baby. And I feel that the Ibn Ezra is not so much of a criticism of these women who made themselves beautiful to their husbands, but it's describing an entirely different a section of women who chose not to, who said, I'm going to let go of these beautification and earthly goods, and I'm going to dedicate myself to God. And I don't know if I don't think he's criticizing the women who do use the mirrors, as opposed to saying there, because it says amongst the Israelites were certain women. He didn't say all women. There were just certain women.
Right.
And so he's dividing these two. And I don't know if he's as much, there might be some judgment in there, but he's just saying that there's a group of women who choose not to do this.
Good. Thank you, Barbara. Joel. And then we go back into the text study.
Yeah, and this really is more of a question. Ibn Ezra wrote when? Pre-1492, post-1492?
He wrote pre-1492.
Okay, so, I mean, to me, everything is context. You have to understand what everyone says based on context. So pre-1492, he was living in a Catholic, heavily Catholic environment where he was surrounded by priests and women religious. So this, as you said, this is a response to, he was influenced by what he saw around him, which were sects and cults of women religious.
Very good. Excellent. No, very, very, very good point. Okay, no question. Okay, I want to take us into two excerpts from the Babylonian Talmud, one from Tractate Yoma, the other from Tractate Brachot, that address this issue of Yetzer Hara, of evil inclinations, okay, or wayward inclinations, however it is that we want to translate it, with regard to idolatry, sexuality, and links very, very well with the topic that we're addressing here. So we're scrolling down to our Tractate Yoma. Okay, and just so you have a bit of background on the discussion that's coming up here, there are two evil inclinations that the rabbis are talking about in this section of the Talmud. One is with regard to idolatry, the other is with regard to sexuality. And they talk about how the urge for idolatry is easy to uproot, relatively easy to uproot, but sexuality is in a different category. sexuality is far more complicated. Look at what it is that they say here. When they saw that the evil inclination for idol worship was delivered into their hands as they requested, the sages, the rabbis, said, since it is an auspicious time, let us pray also concerning the evil inclination for sin in the area of sexual relationships. They prayed, and it was also delivered into their hands. Zechariah the prophet said to them, see and understand that if you kill this evil inclination, the world will be destroyed, because as a result, there will also no longer be any desire to procreate. They followed his warning, and instead of killing the evil inclination, they imprisoned it for 3 days. Right? It's this fantastical story that the rabbis are telling here, in which they imprisoned the evil inclination of sexuality. At that time, people searched for a fresh egg throughout the land of Israel and could not find one. Since the inclination to reproduce was quashed, the chickens stopped laying eggs. They said, what should we do? If we kill it, right, that inclination, that sexual drive, the world will be destroyed. If we pray that it be diminished, that it only be half of what it is, right? In other words, that it only have half its power and be annulled, nothing will be achieved because heaven does not grant half gifts, only whole gifts. What did they do? They gouged out its eyes, effectively limiting its power, and set it free. And this was effective to the extent that a person is no longer aroused to commit incest with his close relatives. Okay, this connects back to this whole notion of the ascetic stream of rabbinic thought. Now, what's fascinating about this excerpt is there's an acknowledgement that there is a substantial qualitative difference between idolatry, right, and sexuality, right? The drive to worship other gods versus, right, the sexual drive. And they point out something very, very powerful here, right? The container itself, right, may be mythic and a product of the rabbinic imagination, but the philosophical statement here that the rabbis are saying here is very, very powerful, right? That it's not something that you can simply, right, do away with. They're acknowledging that this is a natural human drive. This is part of who we are as human beings, right? So it can't be destroyed, because to destroy it would mean an end to the human race, right? It would be an end to, right, the world as we know it, right? As evidenced by this example that they use of chickens laying eggs. But what are they saying, right? They're saying that we put constraints on it, right? We can take the drive and we can put it into a context in which, right, we understand it through law and we understand it, right, through human reasoning. Your comments, questions, pushback.
Kind of a pregnant pause there, but Larry, then Diane Trotterman.
You know, this whole tension of sexuality really starts at the very beginning of Genesis, where your first commandment in the Torah is peru orvu, and this is given. But then after Adam and Eve know the fruits of the tree of good and evil, suddenly there's shame. And so suddenly there's this drive that was given but has to be contained. And it's again, it's just part of what human beings are. And God had given this to us, but again, gave us this constraint because of the sin in the Garden of Eden. And so it's the problem that we're left with, and all of goes through Freud and the id and the superego and all of that sort of business. But again, it's a constant tension even today.
Right, and the beauty of what you're saying, Larry, is that you see this thread running through the entire tradition, because when you think of all of the core mitzvot that we have in Jewish tradition, they're about putting bounds on ourselves. They're about putting constraints so that we can't, rapaciously run after things. So for instance, Shabbat, is about stopping once every 7 days, right? So that you can't simply, right, constantly be, earning and, growing your wealth. You have to put, right, a restraint on, right, that urge to, same thing with Taharat HaMishpacha, when we think of the laws related to family purity and sexuality, how Judaism puts a constraint on that, or kashrut, right, Jewish dietary, it's the same thing, right? It's not that, you go to the open air market in Wuhan and eat whatever you want to eat, right? For many reasons, you don't want to do that, right? But Torah is telling us that there are constraints on what you can eat, right? So you become more, right, by embracing less. I think it's a very, very beautiful notion. Less is more, right? That's how we get to Kiddusha. That's how we get to holiness. Carol.
Diane Trotterman and then Stanley.
I want you to focus on the word incest, because I think that puts a whole different picture on it. And I'm thinking about Noah and, how do you procreate? How do you keep the world going, so to speak? But it's more about, we have this group of people, 650,000, whatever, 613,000 people there. How were they supposed to be able to procreate? And was it incest that this particular passage is talking about, rather than the sexuality of just in general, the actual inclination?
Right. It's interesting because in truth, so you understand how to read this particular text. This is sort of like the way Steinsaltz sets up his Talmudic commentary. What you see in bold is what you literally see in the Talmud. Okay, and what you see in regular type here is the commentary, so it becomes understandable. Yeah. Okay, so the incest piece actually doesn't appear in the Talmud. So what I would say, Diane, is that it seems to me that the text itself is addressing both sexuality in general, having to put bounds on the sexual drive, and also what we're going to read later in the book of Leviticus, right? And Leviticus 19 in terms of, laws related to prohibitions against incest. So I feel that it deals with both here. I'll expand more when we get to the book of Leviticus.
And also I want to talk about a feminist theory, so to speak. Is it up to the men, gouging out the eye, whatever, knowing that, well, you won't have that in front of you. When did we first separate the women and the men in the Orthodox world? It's a big deal. And I don't know the history of why it was separated, although I always thought it was about men looking at the women and they need to be only involved in prayer and things like that. And whose fault is that they have to be separated? The women aren't trying to seduce them. But at any rate, I'd like you to just speak about that. I don't know anything.
Right. The only thing that I'll say now is that Rabbi Professor Lee Levine, who is one of Israel's most accomplished archaeologists and also one of our star alumni of the Jewish Theological Seminary, has pointed out in his archaeological excavations of synagogues, ancient synagogues in Israel, that there was no such thing as a mechitza section, right? It was clear that women and men prayed together in this, or assembled together in the same space. When they start separating, we're not exactly sure. And it could be, apropos of the conversation that Joel and Diane were raising here, it could have been a response to Christianity as well. We don't know, but this is worthy of another shiur, another whole class. Thank you.
Stanley, and then I promised Arvin we'd address his comment in the chat.
Okay, Stanley, and then I want to go back into the text and we'll get there. Arvin, I promise we'll get there.
Okay, so what comes to mind from what you said before is the idea of restraint. So restraint, and that's kind of what came to mind was Freud, who, and because Freud, he was a secular Jew, perhaps an atheist, but he did, speak about the tension between the ego and the superego. Okay, and of course that's mediated by the third part, which escapes me right now.
The id.
The id and the superego, and the ego is the mediator. Okay, right. I'm forgetting it. Right. In any case, what I see here is the need for harmony within the basic human group, the most basic human group, which is the family, which is why there's a prohibition against incest. And and monogamy is the way to keep the family together. And that's also a restraint because two people are, pledged to each other for life. So.
Thank you, Stanley. I bet you can't guess that Stanley is a psychologist. So thank you for that particular perspective. Okay, but definitely, I believe, all of this is rooted right here in the text, and it's not surprising that Freud came up with all of this. I think, a lot of it is so related to, what it is that Torah is teaching us right here and what it is that we see in the thought of the rabbis. Okay, I want to go back into the text itself and take you to that second passage from the Babylonian Talmud. And this is from Tractate Brachot. Okay, very, very interesting teaching that says the following. Okay, the Mishnah articulates a general principle. One is obligated to recite a blessing for the bad that befalls him, that befalls an Israelite or a Jew, just as one recites a blessing for the good that befalls that person, as it is stated, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. Right? You all know, right, that particular quote, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha, right, from the Shema, that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. The Mishnah explains this verse as follows. With all your heart means with your two inclinations, with your good inclination and your evil inclination, both of which must be subjugated to the love of God. With all your soul means even if God takes your soul, and with all your might means with all your money, as money is referred to in the Bible as might. Alternatively, it may be explained that with all your might means with every measure that he metes out to you, whether it is good or troublesome, thank God. Okay, the only point that I want to underscore here is this notion that one is obligated to bless, right, on both the good and the bad, right? And connected to the conversation that we were having before, right? Desire is not inherently positive or negative. Our impulses are kept in check by self-awareness and laws. And there's a recognition here in this particular Talmudic passage, right, that even that which we perceive to be bad in our lives, right, can potentially play a positive role, right, can potentially bring about brachot, blessings in our lives, if only we're attuned to it, right? Oftentimes when we're in the thick of it, when we're in the midst of tragedy, certainly we can't see that, right? But there are ripple effects, and it's those ripples that we see later in our lives, right, as brachot, as good things, as ultimately blessings. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, in his commentary on Exodus 38:8, says the following: it is deeply significant that the vessel of the sanctuary, which was to represent the sanctification of one's hands and legs, was made out of women's mirrors. Mirrors are articles which lay emphasis on the physical bodily appearance of people being an object of special consideration. The whole idea is that the physical and sensual side of human beings should not be excluded from the sphere of the tabernacle. Indeed, it is a central part of sanctifying oneself, for the tabernacle aims at the sanctification of life, right? I love that notion. Right? This is Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, right? One of the greatest German rabbis that ever lived, right? The founder of modern Orthodoxy, right? And what does he say here? Right? He's saying that we take that which is secular, we take that which is profane, we take that which is routine, and we put it into a holy context, right? That there is no question, right, that this should be part of the inner sanctum of the tabernacle, of the holy space, right? After all, that space, the Mishkan, which is about the dwelling place of God, is about the sanctification of life. And I'm just taking off the share. Okay, and I promised Arvin that I would look at his question. So Arvin.
So we know from before the Yetziah, Mitzrayim, that the Israelites, I think the text says that they borrow from their neighbors jewelry, silver.
We call it reparations, Arvin, for 450 years of enslavement.
That's right. So they borrow all this. We never see them return anything. This is after Choshech, but before the Yetziat Mitzrayim. Then they go out with what resources? I don't know. Is this the copper, the gold that they had for the Mishkan? But putting that aside, we've talked about this before. You're in the desert for an X number of years. Somehow you find enough to make Sukkot in the desert. Somehow you find the resources to live for 40 years, construct some type of protective coverings to survive, to have enough to build a Mishkan with materials. So I don't know that they really do have this, but assuming that they don't have it, I don't think that men and women came with all the beauty supplies that would have kept them appealing for so many years, which means that they really didn't have it. And Ibn Ezra, when he comes up with his idea that they were basically ascetics, it elevates the fact that, look, Rashi gives it a holy commitment by them. He says, these were elements of beauty for women. Ibn Ezra says, look, they really didn't have anything to be beautiful about, men or women. So, but why was it so significant? Because these were the women who didn't need them. I don't know that Rashi's making sense unless you say that even in the desert, women had, and men as well, had these resources to make themselves continue to be appealing.
Right. Look, I'm very happy that you're pointing this out. It crossed my mind numerous times as I was thinking of these mirrors. Right. It seems to me that was the source of these mirrors. And what I love so much about the JPS commentary is it points out that Egypt was really the production center of the mirrors that's being spoken about here. Right. So it makes sense that those were taken out with the Israel. And what's also interesting too, as you're talking, Arvin, I'm thinking that the riches were not only used for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle. Remember, the riches were used, right, destructively for the Egel HaZahav, for the golden calf. Right, here we are talking about these evil inclinations, idolatry, sexuality, right? And all of this is coming full circle. And it shows you how one's riches can be used for constructive purposes, right? And very easily for destructive ends as well.
And we have no commentary. I'm not aware of any. Maybe the Haggadah has some commentary on it. Nothing is ever made of the fact that these items were stolen.
Yes, and I remember we discussed this once upon a time. If you take a look at the beginning of the Lovel Haggadah, I mentioned that one idea that you can use in your Seder is to decorate the table, right, with all sorts of faux jewelry, right? Put jewelry out on the table, right? And that will spark questions, right? And that will also spark a great conversation, right? Did we steal these jewels out of you? You know, did we run away with the jewels of our name, or were they reparations for 430 years of slavery,
Yeah.
right? What would
Yep.
Torah have us believe? What do we believe? Carolyn?
Shelley.
Okay, so I think this is very funny. Arvin, thank you, because you related it to today in some way. And the way you related it is this. We've spent the last year in a desert. If we had to do 39 more, would I keep up coloring my own hair? Would I keep up looking in the mirror? I certainly don't wear any rings and have not worn them in literally a year. So it's an interesting question about how much the women may or may not have wanted or needed these items now that you've brought it up, because I can honestly say that there are many women probably who'd prefer not to look in the mirror at all at this point. So I want to thank you for bringing that up.
Sounds to me like you're comparing wandering in the desert for 40 years to a pandemic.
Toby.
I think that Shelley makes a very good point, but at this point, they did not know how long it was going to be. I think they didn't know it was going to be 40 years yet, did they? Because the 40 years came later. So, you know, it looked back to how we felt last April. You know, it was like, oh, we can get through another 2 weeks. And presumably they would have wanted to keep their mirrors for when they reached the promised land and were settled. So yeah, I think that the analysis is really, the analogy is really apt.
Thank you, Toby. I just want to remind you, we haven't reached the promised land yet, even though we're on our way. Since we were talking about mirrors, I couldn't restrain myself. Okay, I need to give you a taste of my favorite page in the Mos Haggadah, which has to do with mirrors. Okay, and this page is actually based, David received his inspiration from one of the medieval manuscripts that sit in the collection of the Jewish Theological Seminary. This is my favorite page of his Haggadah. B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo kihilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. In every generation, we're obligated to see ourselves as if we personally came out of Egypt. So what did David do on this page? He illustrated Jews from all different periods of Jewish history, from all different lands. Apropos of our topic, the men are on one side, the women are on the other. And as the Haggadah opens, each of them sees their own image. And then when the Haggadah is totally open, the idea is that you see yourself. Okay, and David, if David were here sitting next to me, he would say that the only way we could see ourselves as part of Jewish history is when a book is open, right? It doesn't matter if that book is Torah, it doesn't matter if that book is Mishnah, it doesn't matter if it's Leon Uris, right? But a book needs to be open in front of us. It needs to be about Jewish learning. And when that book is open, then we get to see ourselves in this beautiful folio. So I want to wish you all Shabbat Shalom. And again, thank you for being here. Always great having you. Carolyn.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was great. Terrific.
I just want to bring everyone's attention to the chat. Dr. Joel Politzer added a very practical medical reason for the prohibition of incest. And well, you can tell, you know, Joel's background from there.
Right.
Thank you for really all of your comments, your questions. This was a very, very interesting class today. We'll be sending out an email with the recorded copy of this. We'll go ahead and send out the recorded copy of Adit Ness's class from Monday. We'll send out the map. I'll bring your attention to Monday's JTS class on the other. Dr. David Fishman is the teacher for that. Excellent, excellent professor. It should be a very thought-provoking class. And also save the date for March 24th. when David Moss will do a special
Right.
Israel
Right.
liaison program. That'll be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So thank you for joining us all today. I know we didn't get to everybody's questions or comments, but if you have a follow-up, go ahead and send me an email or send Rabbi Berkowitz an email, and we'll try to get to everybody's questions. So thank you. Have a wonderful day, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.
Bye,
Be well.
dear.
Take care.